A lot of our common names we have now for mushrooms were actually invented for this book. I'm going to talk about a few books that are far and away the best. So I get asked all the time about mushroom guidebooks by people who are beginners or people that are, beyond beginning. They're more advanced, but in a mycological society, etc. What's the best book for me as a beginner just starting out? Or what's the better book to kick it up a notch? Or what's a better book for history? I'm going to talk about a few books that are far and away the best. So where it all began with mushrooming and mycology for me was this here book, which you can't really tell what it is because it has this nondescript cover. This is the Audubon Guide to Mushrooms by Gary Lincoff. This came out in the 80s. This is the first book I had when I was in middle school. This is where it all began. Gary was already famous in the 80s and remained famous until he just died just a few years ago. He was the greatest mycologist in North America of my time, and certainly the most renowned educator. Before this book, the Audubon Guide came out, all the other mushroom guidebooks, frankly, were crap. They weren't really pocket size. They weren't really a field guide that you could carry with you. None of them had color photos. All the photos were black and white. And worse than that, they were not even good black and white photos. They were terrible. So when this book came out, everyone got it. And it's part of a series of Audubon guides to trees and flowers and things like this. But this is far and away the most sold book in that series, which is pretty impressive to think that even before mushrooms got cool, this was their big moneymaker. Gary wrote all kinds of other books too on specific things, but this was the one that really everyone started with. It had all of these color plates in the front half, and then it had all these descriptions in the back. And the other thing was, since Gary was like the first to really put together a great big book, a lot of our common names we have now for mushrooms were actually invented for this book. Fun fact, like the amethyst deceiver. Most of the mushrooms in his book, he gave it to Audubon Society, and they're like, so you left out all these common names for mushrooms. He's like, well, that's because they don't have common names. And so they're like, no, everything has to have a common name. So he literally on the spot gave all kinds of common names to mushrooms, and that's just one example. So that's kind of a funny thing there. And it had toxicity and edibility and stuff. Another book that Gary did, which is definitely for beginners. In fact, it's for like how to begin being a beginner, came out by Quarry Press, The Complete Mushroom Hunter. This book is like everything that you need to get started. So I think it's probably really appropriate for a lot of people right now who are just getting started. It has all the basics on basic edibility, toxicity, being careful, how to join a mushroom club or society. Why would you join a mushroom club or society? How to find other books that are a little bit more specialized. This book has it all. Has a lot of really interesting tales about people and getting started and things that Gary encountered and people he encountered over the years. And then it's also broken down by groups of mushrooms. So like the morels, polypores, fall mushrooms, spring mushrooms, et cetera, et cetera. It's a really, really good book. Again, by Quarry Press, Complete Mushroom Hunter. And I think it maybe came out maybe 20 years ago or maybe a little less than that. More recently, sort of a follow-up book by the same press, Quarry Press. They had me do this beginner's guide to mushrooms, which again is kind of the same, but a little bit more advanced. It's how to know mushrooms by group and location. It works, believe it or not, for Europe, Eastern North America, and Western North America. They asked me to do a book that would be useful for beginners anywhere, including Europe. And I said, well, it's kind of hard because there's a lot of different names. But the point was they wanted me to do a book that had mushroom identification by groups, which is a good way for people to learn how to know the Russulas, Cortinarius, Amanitas, etc. And also there's some getting started notes on how to cultivate mushrooms and also how to cook mushrooms. Not a lot of recipes. All the guidebooks have recipes, but it's how to kind of get started cooking mushrooms and just how to know which group cooks which way and how, and also preservation notes, which mushrooms can be dried or which are better to be frozen or which you really shouldn't preserve at all. You should just eat them all on the spot because they don't last very well preserved. So just a lot of basic stuff for there. So that's Complete Mushroom Hunter and the Beginner's Guide to Mushrooms. Hey, if you like this information, follow, like, and subscribe, or leave a comment.
crap.
Well, we're never going to get through them at this point.